Good afternoon and welcome to the Longshore Status webinar. This is the second in a series of 3 webinars, the last of which will be presented in approximately 2 weeks. Today's subject is status. What type of job am I in? But in order to obtain eligibility under the Longshore Act, you need status as well. And that'll come in our webinar in a couple of weeks. If you fail one, you don't need to go on to the second test. You're not going to get Longshore benefits. First, the type of job. But remember, if you're not in the right status, then it doesn't matter what the status is, you're not going to get those Longshore benefits. The Longshore Act status test starts with the term employee means any person engaged in maritime employment, including any longshoreman or other person engaged in longshoring operations, and any harbour worker, including a ship repairman, a shipbuilder and shipbreaker. Those 5 operations of somebody loading or unloading a vessel is a longshoreman. Any type of vessel, doesn't matter how big or small, doesn't have to be a ship or a container ship to get those benefits. A harbour worker could include a ship repairman, a ship builder, or a ship breaker, literally a junkyard for ships. But really where you've got to read this is anybody engaged in maritime employment, but such term does not include. So we're going to go through the exclusions this afternoon, and those are the critical parts of the Longshore Act. Who does not qualify under status? The first is individuals employed exclusively to perform office clerical, secretarial, security or data processing work. And the word exclusively here says if they do anything outside of these fields, then they lose that exemption even when they return to that job. A couple of cases I think will illustrate this. Eileen Manzo versus Carnival Cruise Lines. Manzo was a clerical employee. She was the check-in clerk for Carnival Cruise Lines. She stood behind a desk and would give people their A cards, what the equivalent of a room card. Nowadays they have a little picture on it, so it becomes your ID as well, and your ability to spend a lot of money on the cruise ship, or they will again when they're running. Full function. It's performed in an office type of environment with a counter and a desk, a photocopier, some computers, everything you'd expect in a normal office. But the courts ruled because this was an integral part of the cruising industry, and therefore maritime employment, that even though the function itself was clerical, this was considered longshore. Mrs. Boone up in Newport News Shipbuilding had a similar function. She was an accountant. She went down in the warehouse to collect some invoices to pay bills and was injured down in the warehouse. So even though her function was clearly clerical, she was no longer in that office environment and thus considered longshore. The second exclusion is individuals employed by a club, camp, recreational operation, restaurant, museum, or retail outlet. A club would be a boat club, a yacht club, something with the members, not a full. Be a Boy Scout camp, Girl Scout camp, sheriff's camp, anything, again, voluntary type and non-for-profit. Recreational operation is going to be considered things like those beach rentals where you rent pedalos and maybe beach chairs and umbrellas. We'll come back to a restaurant in a moment. Museum would include an aquarium. So an aquarium employees are excluded from longshore. Or a retail outlet, a store on the waterfront maybe that sells just about anything would be excluded from longshore. But let's spend a minute talking about a restaurant. A restaurant is excluded from longshore. Doesn't matter where it is or the employees of the restaurant are. Doesn't matter where it is, what they do, or the employees of the restaurant are. Doesn't matter where it is, what they do, or how they do it. It can be waterfront, it can have a boat up process, but the employees of the restaurant are excluded from longshore. But unfortunately, there's not an exclusion for catering operations. In reality, they're not. And if a caterer comes along and works on a dock or on a vessel temporarily, they could well be considered longshore. The third exclusion is the marina exclusions. Individuals employed by a marina who are not engaged in construction, replacement, or expansion of the marina, other than for routine maintenance. First, we have to define what a marina is. It's a business that gets its income predominantly from storage of recreational boats. It can have commercial boats in there, but again, predominantly from recreational boats. And storage. Storage could be on land, could be in the water, could be on buoys, doesn't really matter. That's a marina. If the income comes predominantly from repair, then it would be considered a boatyard, and we'll get to those in just a minute. If you construct, replace, or expand the marina, then you're going to be longshore. If you just work at the marina without doing that construction, you're exempt from longshore. Fortunately, that gives us a problem, particularly up in the northern part of the country, because every spring and fall, the marina employees work to pull in the docks and do other winterizing, which will be considered construction, replacement, or expansion, and then reverse that process in the spring to make sure that every marina has longshore policy, at least on an if any basis, so that if they do this construction, replacement, or expansion, or even if they just try and get the benefits, there's some way to either pay the benefits or at least defend. The fourth exclusion is for suppliers, transporters, or vendors who are temporarily on a marine situs, and again we'll talk about situs later, and are not engaged in work performed by employees of that. The design for the truck driver who drives into a port or terminal, drops their cargo or container, and then leaves again. It is, according to the Department of Labor, the most frequently requested exclusion and the rarest granted. Exclusion. Let's say that truck driver drives into the port. They have a container on the back of the truck. The crane comes down to load that container directly on the ship. He's a longshoreman because he's directly involved in the loading and unloading process. In fact, this has been extended to a pest control company who went on cruise ships to spray for fuzzy things running around. Department of Labor said, yeah, you're a supplier, transporter, and vendor, and you're temporarily on that marine situs. But we don't believe people will cruise on cruise ships with critters running around, so therefore your services are essential to cruising, and therefore you're longshore. There are very few examples of where this will actually stand up. But if you insure a trucking company that moves to the port occasionally, you better make sure that you lock the drivers in their cabs to make sure they don't do anything to turn them into longshoremen. The next exclusion is aquacultural workers. These are fish farmers. Case law has taken this a little further to say it only applies if the fish farming is happening in a controlled environment, like a cage, a pen, water. So if somebody just walks out into a bay, throws a bunch of clams in there and comes back a few months later, they could still be longshore. Prior to 2009, we had a nice clear definition for who was a longshoreman in regard to recreational vessels. And it read, individuals employed to build, repair or dismantle any recreational vessel under 65 feet in length. But in 2009 we had a change in longshore law which took out that repair and dismantle and added these words highlighted. And this is how it reads now. Individuals employed to build any recreational vessel under 65 foot in length, or individuals employed to repair any recreational vessel or to dismantle any part of a recreational vessel in connection with the repair of this vessel. Here's a different way to look at it. If you repair, service, build, construct or manufacture a recreational vessel under 65 foot, you were and you still are state workers' comp. If you repair, service, build or construct any commercial vessel, you were and you are longshore. But here's the funny part of this. If you repair or service a recreational vessel over 65 foot, you're state work comp. But if you build, construct or manufacture that same vessel, you're longshore. And that's just such a weird difference. Let's assume that you are an HVAC and you work on a brand new build today. A brand new build today. And it's over 65 foot. Fairly easy job. You can work along as the vessel's being built, install all the ducts, do everything else you need to. But you put in that higher longshore classification since 2009. Flip side of the coin, you go the next day and you work on an old rusty vessel and have to rip out old air conditioning before replacing new, or heating for those of you up north. You go to the lower rated state workers' compensation benefits and classes. That just seems ridiculous to me. And classes. That just seems ridiculous to me. But that is how the 2009 amendments happened. There's also a lot of debate about what is a recreational vessel. And simplistically, it does not include charter boats of most types. Recreational vessels that we published some 5 years or so ago and is on our website. And we will update that soon, but the definition really has not changed. So if you need to know what's a recreational vessel, go and look at that webinar, please. Here's one of the big kickers though. It says if the individuals described in clauses A through F are subject to coverage under a state workers' comp law. So all those exclusions that we've just talked about go away unless there's workers' comp coverage in force for that employee. The feds won't allow you to duck out and providing coverage to somebody in some format. The last two exclusions are a master and member of a crew of any vessel. Those are Jones Act. And some casual labour engaged directly by a vessel. It has to be a small vessel under 18 tons net, but it's casual labour and it can only be engaged directly by the vessel, not by some intermediary. Again, a lot of people apply for this, but frankly, I've never seen it used. In a different part of the Act, there is also a part that says it does not apply to government employees. But there's a case out there that shows a port authority who generates its own revenue and operates independently would not be considered a government body. So this is really just restricted to people who work for the federal, state, or local government itself, not the port authority that might fall within that government. Here's just a list of some of the cases where the employees have been held to be longshore. If you'll remember, there were just 5 when we started this list. And on these 3 pages, there are close to 100 total types of employment. Again, remember, you have to have both situs and status to get benefits. You have status now if you don't fall into any of the exclusions we've just considered.